so we'll go ahead and begin. I want to just thank everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. Obviously, some interesting times. That's kind of
Yes.
why we went with the Dr. Seuss theme. All the places we will go and the things we'll see have been very interesting, and I'm sure this is pressing for a lot of associations, and so wanted to touch base on that piece. This is being recorded, so if some of you guys have to jump off early, that's perfectly fine. We're going to be able to post this online, and you'll be able to see that. I'll start just kind of a quick introduction. So my name is Devon Schad, the owner and president of the Schad Agency. We insure hundreds of associations across Colorado. Been doing it since about 1976. My father started it. That's why I look maybe a little younger than being able to insure since 1976. But still a family-run business. My dad works in the agency, so does my sister. And so we've got a good amount of experience, and then also just learning how to have homeschooled children now, because we've got two young ones. So that's been fun. And I want to also give Melissa an opportunity to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Garcia, and I'm an HOA attorney with Altitude Community Law. I've been doing this for over 20 years now. And before Colorado, I practiced in the wild, wild west in Vegas for 3 years. And coming here, I've been here now over 17 years. Love it. That's all we do is HOA law. So I'm happy to talk about this. And I love teaching and doing webinars and all this good stuff. So thanks for joining us.
Perfect. All right, so we're going to discuss, insurance and the law, implications, go over some pressing questions. If you've got questions, I'm going to hopefully try to keep everyone muted. You do have the ability to unmute, but if you've got a question, just use the chat feature. You can actually, if you're on your computer, you can click on the middle of the screen and there's a chat button. If you have the participant view, it'll be on the right. On your phone, you'll hit the three little dots. So during our presentation, feel free to go ahead and type some questions in. And then at the end, hopefully we'll open it up so we'll be able to have other additional questions as well. We're going to obviously try to get this done quickly, everyone on their way. So yeah, we appreciate it. I'm going to start talking about from the insurance perspective and will insurance pay and understanding those pieces. So there's different types of insurance coverage. The first one I'm going to talk about is the property form or property insurance coverage. Now, most of us aren't going to be as concerned about this, but this would be including loss of business income. So potentially the association charges for its facilities and has income coming in from those pieces. I would say that 99% of insurance policies today on the property form have a very specific virus exclusion. In my perspective, from an insurance standpoint, I don't really see a way around having coverage in that. And that's going to be pretty much across the board. So there'll be very few. Where we get into the next statement, which is probably a bigger concern for a lot of associations, is general liability. When we look at general liability, the response has to have legal liability. So if there's no legal liability, the policy isn't triggered. When we talk about legal liability, that means the wrongdoer, was found of negligent conduct. They did something that breached the duty owed to the injured party. Injured parties suffered damages, like actual damages, right? So potentially they got sick, they were out of work, there was damages specific to those individuals. And the wrongdoer's negligent conduct, the proximate cause was the injury or damage. If we've met legal liability, the next thing we have to look at is it going to be defined as an occurrence? There's a lot of, in the insurance world, going back and forth, can we define this as an occurrence? Nonetheless, let's say it meets those first two, there would also potentially be exclusions on the general liability form. I will tell you, it is not across the board that you wouldn't necessarily have coverage. There are a lot of exclusions that you'll find on the general liability policy form. One of them would be a mold and microorganism exclusion. A lot of companies will define a microorganism as being a virus in terms of that definition. So those would be pretty clear. So if you have a mold or microorganism exclusion, it's unlikely you'd have GL coverage. The second would be if there could be a pathogen exclusion, and they would define pathogen as a virus. And then we also have communicable disease exclusions, you'll find some, all, or none. So I can't tell you that across the board you won't have general liability coverage. It's really hit or miss. It seems like when I've looked at policies that we've written or different companies and their policy forms, it's maybe about 60% wouldn't have it, maybe 40% would. So just kind of reiterating, you have to have legal liability. It's got to qualify as an occurrence. The injured party, this is the big one, would have to prove the exposure is from the insurer's action and the claim is not hindered or stopped by any of the exclusions found in the policy. So in reality, the likelihood a business owner is going to be held legally liable for an injury to a third party is, in my mind, pretty much low to non-existent. That being said, the lack of legal liability doesn't stop people, of course, from suing to prove negligence. I did have a chance actually to speak to a personal injury attorney just to see if this was a case that potentially they would take on. Their thought is that someone would have to be extremely negligent. Hey, they did it against the orders. They weren't following social distancing. They made it an environment that was really bad. And you'd have to be able to really be able to prove that that's where they came down with the coronavirus. I know that there are a couple states that are working on providing legislation around making sure businesses couldn't be sued for this. I know that Oklahoma, the Senate just passed a bill that's going to their state house. That hasn't happened in Colorado, but there is a lot of push to do that on the national level, on a federal level. So I think we might see something like that because it's not just association. I mean, we're talking about every business is going through the same question. Should we open our doors? What's our legal ramifications? And could we be affected? So I'll see if I can look at that question in a second. We're going to go on. I'm going to ask a couple questions for Melissa. Melissa,
Yay.
can you tell us, what is the current Colorado kind of law or regulations around us opening our pool or facilities for our communities?
Okay, so right now, and I don't know if anybody's really regularly looking at it, but if you need to look at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment website. And so that they keep a running tab of all the executive orders and the governor's orders that have come up to date, and they keep it updated. So as it stands right now, with respect to pools, I mean, that's really what we're talking about today. There's other amenities that are addressed as well, but with respect to pools, the current safer at home order does not allow you to open your pools at this point. It is in effect until midnight, May 26th. So until then, your pools are supposed to remain closed. So the order itself doesn't say specifically HOA pools must be closed. But what the department did was every time that they revise the order, they also update their FAQs, so they're frequently asked questions. And there's a whole section on amenities and recreational activities and everything. And the question, one of the number one questions is, are swimming pools allowed to be open? And it specifically says indoor, and this is with respect to indoor or outdoor pools, as well as HOA pools. So they call out HOAs. And so the answer to that frequently asked question was no. And that's been the answer for quite some time. So we're waiting until the order is up as of midnight, May 26th, and we'll see what the revisions are. We're waiting for additional guidance, which we haven't gotten yet. There's probably going to be criteria and conditions for reopening, but for now, don't open your pool. You can ready it, certainly, but don't open it at this point.
Perfect. In terms of, right, and obviously if the estate opens and says, hey, you can open your pool, are associations then required to open their facilities?
No. So here's another thing. When you get an order from the state, or also look at the local orders too, because they can be more restrictive than the state, and they can be less restrictive if they apply for a variance. But when you're looking at any kind of order, that's the state or the local order telling you this is what the state or local government is going to do. In terms of the association, the boards of directors have to follow their own guidelines. They're held to their own governing documents, and they also have the scope of authority that's in their governing documents. So if the state says it's okay to open, but the association, the board of directors thinks because of the circumstances, because of the type of community, maybe it's a high risk, because there's a lot of traffic, because you're not able to meet some of the requirements of the potentially new order about reopening the pools. The boards have the authority to regulate those common elements. So they can still keep it closed even if the state starts to loosen the requirements. One of the things, I know that boards have a lot of angst about this, making a decision with respect to any amenity. People are going to get mad because they keep it closed, or people are going to be mad because they open them. Somebody's going to be mad. You're not going to be able to please everyone. So what boards have to remember is when making this decision, it has to be reasonable, has to be informed, which means know the state and the local orders, and it has to be in the best interest of the association. If you act according to that standard, and good faith is one of them too, so good faith, informed, and in the best interest of the association, whatever that decision will be is going to be defensible. So regardless of if a lawsuit comes your way, it's going to be defensible. So just keep that rule in mind when trying to figure it out. And obviously speak to your attorney if you're not sure what to do.
Perfect. Now, so she brought up a point which I didn't actually touch on, was directors and officers. That's another coverage specifically where we potentially could see claims. From when I did the research, and from our experience with the SARS and MERS, which wasn't as big for us, I could not find where there was a claim specifically around that for D&O. That obviously doesn't mean that couldn't happen in the future. Although most D&O directors and officers policies do have a bodily injury exclusion. So it'd be unlikely to find D&O coverage for that specifically. I could see claims potentially brought forward. Let's say if we don't open the facilities, somebody is telling us we should, and they want to force us to open our facilities. There could potentially be claims in that case. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say there's a couple of questions coming up here that I do want to address as well. But yeah, D&O liability insurance has always come up as a question. Well, are we going to be protected that way too? But, this is, as I was talking to Devon before this started, there's no pandemic playbook right now. We're making it up as we go, and we're looking at various orders and other entities to give us that information so we can provide better guidance, But there's already a couple of questions. Do you mind if I take these really quick, Devon?
Yeah, perfect, yeah.
Okay, so tennis courts. I was going to pull up the order because tennis courts is we were talking about pools, but there are certain amenities that the order already says, specifically the order when you're looking for whether or not you should open amenity. The pertinent language is that if it's an area that's conducive to public gathering and an attended area, then it should remain closed. So they named a bunch of things that are not within that category, but now they're allowing basketball courts, tennis courts, I think. I don't have the order up in front of me. So what I think about tennis courts is, since it's one of the specific things that you can open, then you need to look at the specific conditions that are required to be met in order to open it as well. And I'm going to see if I can pull it up really quick. The other thing too is, regardless of the conditions that are in the order, look at the local order as well. So again, the Boulder or Denver or whomever, they might be stricter, and they're allowed to be stricter. So don't just look at the state order, look at your local order as well. Also, with respect to tennis courts, there is the U.S. Tennis Association, if you just Google that, they have fantastic criteria and recommendations that they give to both those that are playing tennis as well as those that are running the tennis courts and making sure the tennis courts are okay. I would think that the board, in making an informed decision of whether to open it and what to do if you do open it, should make themselves informed by looking at these experts, particularly the U.S. Tennis Association. They've got some great criteria. So I would definitely look at that for some additional guidance of what you should do. Okay. Oh, that's cool. Did you see that, Devon? Okay. All right. So let's go back. So tennis courts, they are allowed, but look at these specific requirements and conditions. What else? Can the HOA restrict pool use exclusively to owners? Yes. So you have the authority to regulate your pool and your facilities. And because of what's going on right now with COVID, though that regulation authority, as well as your duty to make sure that the association is maintained and make sure that you're complying with the order, it's expanded in a way, and it allows you to adopt rules that you wouldn't normally adopt. I mean, oftentimes the association, they bring guests, they bring family members and everything. That makes sense in a regular non-COVID world, but it doesn't make sense today. So I would definitely, that's one of the things I would be considering is nobody other than residents or owners should be able to use the pool. And also, in the future, whatever the governor says, I know that there's going to be conditions about social distancing controls and all of that. So when you're opening the pool and you're being informed, you got to remember, how do you maintain those social distancing controls if you have a ton of people that are going to be there? I mean, if it says, let's say a revised order says you can only open your pool to 50% capacity. So how are you going to monitor that? And if you allow residents to have guests, that might not be feasible. So we'll go into the specifics of other things that we require or we recommend, but I would think that you should limit it to residents and owners as well. And it is, yes, somebody had mentioned the order is 2028, so that's what's in place right now. What about pool users signing exemptions from COVID exposure? So the other thing that you got to remember is, regardless of what you do and the precautions you take and how often you clean everything and disinfect, and even if you have the best possible precautions that you're taking, people might get sick anyway. And so you're not going to be able to prevent yourself from potentially being subject to not liability, but a lawsuit. It would be very difficult, as Devon said, to actually hold an association liable for exposure to illness, simply because homeowners and residents, they have their own duty to keep themselves healthy. But the waivers, I think, are a good idea anyway, as just an added layer of precaution. And by the waiver, I mean something that says we understand the pandemic that's occurring, and we're waiving our rights to go after the association in order to use the pool. And we're going to use the pool according to all the rules and regulations. So yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily real protection. I would say it's another layer of caution. I will say that sometimes it's enough to make people just not go after the association because they know they have a waiver and they've signed it and they've waived their right. But even if you signed a waiver, that doesn't mean somebody else has signed a waiver, and it's not 100% protection. It's just another precaution. If the limit is left at 10, can the HOA make owners sign up to use the pool? I would recommend that. That's one of the things that I would recommend is a registration system and some kind of cap. And so everybody knows, well, the pool is going to open. We're only able to get a certain number of people in there because of the order. Let's say it says still no more than 10. So you register, and at this time you can come, and we're going to be monitoring it and making sure that no more than this amount of people are going to come in. So that prevents the residents from getting angry if they're turned away and they had no idea that the capacity was already met. So you can somehow, I would say, work with your management company, work with your attorney to come up with some kind of registration system so that you are maintaining those numbers and making it feasible. And you send out, oh, go ahead.
I think we go back to these questions. My thought is maybe, because I think some of the questions are obviously around mitigating some of the exposure. So maybe you talk about some ways that may be good to potentially mitigate the risk if they do open, obviously conforming with whatever our state may ask us to do.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton. All of these questions are really about that. So if and when you do open the pool, if you decide to make that decision, because again, you're not required to do this, even if the state loosens the requirement. If you make that decision, there's a lot of things that we think you should consider. You should have a pool pandemic plan. I had written down a bunch of things that I was thinking about, and I know that Devon had put some stuff in here too, but registration system is one of them. You need to figure out what you're going to do about the furniture, because are you going to keep furniture in there? If you are going to keep the furniture, are you going to space it so people aren't more than 6 feet together? Are you going to wipe it down? You're going to give people sanitizing wipes so that every time they move the lounge and the chair or whatever, they wipe it down? Are you going to be monitoring it? So the furniture is one thing you should be considering, and I would say just get rid of the furniture altogether. So that kind of removes, you don't have to, but that removes any other additional requirements. The bathrooms, closing the bathrooms, that's come up a couple of times. So I know with public and semi-public pools, you can't do that. They have to be available for use. There's certain regulations out there. But for private pools, I haven't found anything that says you can't close the pools with the not the pools, I'm sorry, the bathrooms. So, I mean, if you do close them, some things I worry about is, what are the kids going to do if they're in there? I mean, where are they going to go to the bathroom? You kind of figure they might, do what kids normally do.
The same place they always have gone.
Yeah. And I read something, and I don't know where I read this, but I don't know. I know that they say that chemicals in the pool, you can't really catch the virus in the pool itself because the water has these chemicals, and it stops the virus from being affected here, or from people getting the virus. But I read somewhere, I thought that if there's frequent urination in the pool, that actually affects the effectiveness of whatever that chemical is. So, I mean, I don't know if it's a good idea or not to close the pools. Also, what if there are disabled people? What if there are people, I mean, the circumstances where they're going to need to use the restrooms. So I think legally you might be able to do it. I haven't found anything that says you can't do it, but just know that there's problems that are attendant to that. If you do keep it open, then you have to put that in your plan. How often are you going to go in there and sanitize it and keep it clean? Time frames for use. I think that's what you meant, right, Devon? We have that in your list.
I think the list we went over was if people are considering closing bathrooms, waivers, which we've already discussed, cleaning, so having the cleaning times.
Well, and also the rules. So your rules, that's one of the things you should be updating right now, is rules to, again, address the social distancing requirements and incorporate those into your swimming pool rules and any other amenities as well. And I don't think this is in our question here, but or in our list, but I don't think that you can just put a sign out there saying swim at your own risk. If the order is very specific of what you have to do in order to maintain social distancing and open your pool, if you don't have the feasibility to do that or the ability to do that, then you probably should keep that facility closed. Otherwise, you should be monitoring it and making sure people are complying, and just having a sign up there is not enough. I think that would lead to liability. Maybe still a stretch, but you have to have some kind of enforcement. Certainly, if somebody is telling you that the pool rules are being violated, then you certainly have to enforce those. But that's, I guess, my question to a lot of people on here. Are you going to hire extra staff? Are you going to expand the role of your pool monitors? Are you going to have board members that are going to be present so they can monitor it? Are you going to have a volunteer homeowner that's going to be monitoring it? These are things that help minimize the exposure to liability.
So we have another question from David Houston. Section 1H is the only reference to pools. Its scope is outside public spaces. How are HOA pools public when they are not? The list includes amusement parks and arcades. It specifically calls out public pools, so HOA pools do not seem to be covered by these orders.
Yeah, that section is actually talking about places of public accommodation. So the one area in the order that actually does discuss pools is pools which are defined as gyms. It's really talking about gymnasiums, and they call gymnasiums pools. They include pools in them. And they apply that particular provision to places of public accommodation. That could include associations, but what it really means, places of public accommodation are places that are open to the public, the general public. So what it says is places of public accommodation are to remain closed except for this limited purpose. And then it gives some conditions to leaving the pool open in these limited circumstances. I can't remember exactly what it says, but I think it says it has to be family members that are together, and or no more than 4 people in a group. and they don't have to be family members. So again, that whole section is applicable only to places of public accommodation. Because it's not in the order. What I said was the order is then clarified in the FAQ. So I'm perfectly comfortable relying on the order, which is issued by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, which also issued the answers to the FAQ. So in my opinion, that's enough. That's enough for me to say, don't open the pools until something changes under the new order, which hopefully will come out May 26th or earlier. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, and so FAQ answers, again, I mean, I wish they would have been very, very clear in the order and said HOAs versus the FAQ, but it's just a tool for you to use to become informed and then make your own regulations over the common elements which you have jurisdiction to regulate based on those orders and based on the FAQ and based on whatever the local orders say.
That's another question. Beth Ann, I'll probably butcher your last name, Beer. What if we have no staff to enforce restrictions that the HOA imposes or that the state requires? Can we still open the pool / courts and avoid liability?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, I think that you have to do something. And I know a lot of associations, like right now in Florida, where they're opening in certain places in California, they're hiring extra staff just for this, or they're having the board member or a homeowner volunteer monitor it. I think some have actually installed cameras just to make sure that there's something. Now, when it comes to liability, again, the courts are going to say what was reasonable under the circumstances. A lot of associations right now, because of COVID, probably don't have a lot of money coming in. Maybe homeowners aren't able to pay their assessments, and so they don't have a lot of budget for this kind of stuff. So you do as much as you can, whatever that can be. Maybe it's the rules and regs up, maybe it's a sign. But my gut reaction is if there's no way to monitor it, and if you just have a sign up, and if you have the type of pool that allows a lot of people, a lot of traffic versus the pool that maybe gets 1 or 2 people a day. So again, looking at the circumstances of the community, I would say don't open it. If you have a lot of people and you don't have some mechanism for monitoring it, I wouldn't feel comfortable with an association opening it. But again, the courts, they look at what's reasonable under the circumstances. Like somebody who has a 1,000-unit association with money to do this, they obviously have some resources at their fingertips. Another association which may have less than 50 units and a pool which may not be used very much, maybe they're in a better position to say, look, we have no money. We have other priorities that actually are much more important than this. We have barely a few people that ever use the pool or use the gyms. So because of that, and because we've documented that, again, paper trail is great for showing that you made an informed decision. Because of that, we're still going to open the pool, but we're going to put these signs up. We're going to put these rules and regs up. And if somebody tells us that you're violating, you're suspended from using the pool. So, you know, I mean, there's no perfect fit for every single association.
And so we're almost at the 12:30. That was kind of my goal. It seems like we got a lot more questions to go through. I'm happy to kind of continue, Melissa, if you still got time. For everyone else,
yeah.
Okay, if everyone else, if you guys want to stay on, you're more than welcome to. If not, I am going to record this, so I'm going to put it up on our Schad Agency YouTube page, as well as our Schad Agency Facebook page, so you can search for us on there and potentially find it if you do have to leave, because that was a goal. But we got a good amount of questions, so we'll kind of go through. Thomas Kellogg asked, how do we police waivers? If Johnny fakes his parents' because he wants to use the pool.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, with any kind of waiver, any kind of document, I mean, there's only what you can do, and it's almost like an honor system. Somebody might lie about not having a tenant in their place, and that's another thing. How are you really realistically going to monitor and enforce that? There's no great answer to that. You just kind of, if it comes to your attention that something has been faked and you realize it, then that's when you enforce it and say, okay, this person can't use the pool anymore, or whatever the enforcement remedies you put in place. One thing I will say really quickly, though, about enforcement is I keep hearing about situations where the pool is closed and people are coming to the pool, and then board members or managers are getting into fistfights over this. You don't want to put yourself in any kind of danger. That's not what you need to do. If something is happening and you think the local order is being violated or the state order, you can Use your own remedies, which are HOAs, or there's fines. You can fine them. That has no violence involved. You can contact the local public health authorities. They should be able to enforce their own orders as well. Don't resort to any kind of violence or get into that situation. I know that people are very frustrated right now, but I just don't want boards or managers getting into that position. What about signs?
Sign, a sign at the pool that provides warning instead of waivers, would that be good enough?
I think that's one thing you can do in addition to everything else. So everything is sort of like a layer of precaution that you take. The more layers, I think the better it is for the association in minimizing your exposure to liability. Not one thing fits everyone. Certainly, again, when it comes to the sign, maybe that'll work with a smaller association that doesn't have a lot of traffic in the pool. I don't think it's enough if you know that there is a large number of people that are coming to the pool. It's okay not to have the waiver, but if you were going to pick between the two, I think signs and rules and regulations are the best way to go, because you're paper trailing that, hey, this is what we're held to, and we want you to know what your regs are too, and if you violate it, we're going to enforce it. The waiver itself, it's I've seen it be helpful in inhibiting people from suing, but people sue anyway, and I do think that what you really need to go back to is the association board of directors. Did they make a good faith, reasonable, informed decision in whatever action they took? If they did, the courts are going to protect you. They do not want to second guess boards that are making decisions according to standard, and they don't want to chill the potential pool of people who might never serve on the board if they thought they could be liable for their decisions, particularly now with such unprecedented circumstances.
Steve Eller, can you deny access to the HOA pool if the homeowner won't sign a liability waiver?
If those are your regs, yeah. If you put those in your regs, then you can enforce your regs and you can deny liability or deny somebody accessing. And, that's where I'm saying about the whole fight. I don't want people fighting. Uh-oh, can somebody mute? I think it's Jen. Okay, thanks, Jen. So yeah, you can say, no, you can't come in. I don't know if you guys have been seeing online about like the whole Home Depot, and you can regulate it just like them. But if it becomes violent, I don't want you then getting into any kind of fist fights about this. I did hear, there's one of the questions that hasn't come up yet, but was in our topics, has to do with people that are complaining that, well, if I don't have access to the pool, then you need to refund my assessment. So that's a big no. You should say no. I mean, if anything, a lot of associations might actually incur more additional expenses because they have to adhere to all these protocols, social distancing protocols, and increase their maintenance and increase their, cleaning mechanisms and all that. You are closing the pool according to the circumstances. You're closing it because of the state or local order. You're closing it because it's in the best interest of the association to do, and you have the right to do that. Paying assessments, they're the lifeblood of the association. They're a completely different obligation that's independent and separate. And I'll bet you anything that your declaration actually says non-use or waiver of use or inability to use the amenities is not a waiver of or the ability for you to waive your assessments. Maybe 75% of the declarations that I've seen, the covenants, have that language. So don't refund, because if you refund now, then you're going to be special assessing probably 3 or 4 months from now, a lot more because of whatever the costs. Okay.
From Sue, Spinnaker HOA, thoughts on hot tubs?
Hot tubs, I know that there's nothing, I don't think that there's anything in the order that addresses hot tubs, but hot tubs are very close, obviously. I don't know, there's really big ones, but the conditions under the order now and probably in the future are going to maintain those social distancing protocols, which require a number of people, like probably no more than a certain number of people, and they require you to be a certain space apart, even though there's exceptions here and there. So I'm going to hold off on anything that isn't necessarily specifically addressed in the order. There's guidance coming down. There is a department of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, that's a mouthful, does have pool and hot tub regulations that are applicable to public and semi-public pools, but you can certainly take the guidelines in that document and use that to make an informed decision with respect to your own pool or your own hot tub. But it just seems it would be very difficult to comply with whatever the new, if there are going to be new social distancing protocols are with respect to hot tubs. So.
Okay, and then the same thing with sauna, so I would assume the same answer. Another question from Kate Herman. If only the women's restroom has easy access to the pool areas, can it be turned into a family unisex restroom for the season? Or is it better to close all together or get 2 portable restrooms?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I'm trying to find where we are in the question, sorry.
Yeah.
So I can read that one. Oh, here we go. If only the women's restroom has easy access. I think that creates problems in itself. I think that you have the regulation authority to do both, as long as you're very clear. Because of the circumstances, that particular pool has easier access, or not pool, I keep saying pool. That particular restroom has better access than, again, when you're talking about making a decision to change access to the pool or the ability to use the restroom. You're looking at it, whether it's in the best interest of the association. So you need to take the circumstances in hand and say, well, which one? You're going to have to make that tough decision. Which one is better? Do we close the restrooms altogether? Well, we talked about some of the issues with that. Do we keep them both open? Do we change one so that's unisex? If we do, what are the things that we have to do? We have to notify everybody. We have to maybe change the signage. We have to say this is temporary because of the COVID circumstances. So, there's no right or wrong answer, but the answer is make sure that you've paper trailed and notified everybody of what your informed decision was and why that's in the best interest of the association versus closing the public restrooms.
From David Houston, we are planning to require masks in restrooms, supply wipes and hand sanitizer, ensure there's extra soap so can we open the pool tomorrow since the actual health order does not cover HOA pools?
Well, I'm still gonna push back and say that even though the language is not in the order, I think that the FAQs are taken directly from the same entity that issues those orders. So I would say no. I would wait until at least midnight of the 26th and maybe have a midnight pool party. No, I don't know. But yeah, when it comes, it doesn't directly, you're right, it doesn't directly say HOAs. It does say any areas that are conducive to public gathering and attended areas. I think that in itself implies pools. If you look at some of the definitions of attended areas, and it clarifies and to me, it implies that pools are included in that. So they didn't name a lot of things, not like some of the other states, but you can still imply that pools are included in it, and I would use that FAQ. If you do want to open, then here are all the other things, and you've already mentioned the supply wipes that require the masks, sanitizer and everything, hopefully not have any furniture or have some mechanism in place for keeping the furniture clean. That's going to minimize any exposure to liability. So if you make that decision, just remember to do all the other things that are reasonable for your association.
A couple other waiver questions. Do you have the owner or tenant sign it or both?
The owner or the tenant, I think whoever's using it should be signing it. So whoever's going to be using the pool should be signing the waiver.
And I know there was, and I think I missed a question, but I think there was a question, can you restrict pool use to only owners and not?
Yeah, we talked about that, and I said, yeah, you can regulate, you can adopt that as a rule, that you restrict it to owners and, well, residents, those owners and residents, and restrict guests from coming. But there is a question here. It says, can you direct us to the FAQ page reference? Yeah, do we have a list of everybody that's on here, Devon? I mean, I don't really know how to.
I don't know how that works. I have the Colorado.gov Safer at Home fact. I don't know if it's an FAQ.
Yeah, it's.
But I think someone else did post a different link.
I wish I got to get to know Zoom better. I know that I could probably just.
Yeah, Jen Woodman just
open up the. Oh, I know. I could probably share my screen. I know, but. Yeah, you could also just email me and I'll get it to you. I'll get you the exact order and highlight it and show you where it talks about pools in the order versus where it talks about it in the FAQ. And you'll see the order itself, or when it references these places of public accommodations, is talking about indoor pools and indoor facilities. And there seem to be all these limitations on that reference. But again, that's only places of public accommodation, which most associations are not. You're a private place. You only open it to your.
Melissa, is all right if we put your email in on the chat?
Yeah. So should I just type it in here? Or
yeah, okay. Perfect. Yeah, that would be great. Then if people want to email either one of us, they can. Let's see.
Okay.
The questions we have.
Oops, that went to Kim privately.
You can do it again. It's just the drop down. You can choose everyone.
Okay.
Let's see. Let me go back.
Okay. Oh, thank you to Jen who posted that.
Some people are asking for pool guidelines or recommendations sample anywhere.
Yeah. If you email me, I'll send you. CAI has some good guidelines. CDC has some great guidelines as well for pools, so we can send that. There's a U.S. Swimming Association, but I don't think that there's, from what I remember, I looked at theirs about a month ago, and it didn't seem to have much. Not like the Tennis Association. They had some great recommendations and criteria. I don't know if it's been updated yet, so I haven't seen the U.S. Swimming Association, but definitely the CDC has some good ones. I can also send you the state one, the state regs that applies to public and semi-public pools. The same concept and guidelines can be used by the association, because it's the same idea, is how often to wipe it down, what you should be doing. And so I'll send those as well. If you just send me an email, I'll respond.
Let's see. Just another question back from David Houston about the pool area being over half acre in size so they can maintain social distancing. They have signs that they're going to use.
That's great. Signs, rules, and regs. Let me see if there was anything else that I think we covered most of it. Oh, another place that you can talk to, or another entity, is probably your vendors, your pool vendors. They probably have some great recommendations as well. So you might want to talk to them.
Yeah. Do we know if pools would be allowed to open after 5/26? What if the order is extended or changes in other ways, but not with regard to the pools?
Yeah, we're just in a wait and see. So we don't know, and I keep checking it every single day, and haven't seen anything yet. So at this point, we're just at a wait and see. And as soon as it comes out, we're going to blog about it and get that out there.
From John Ray about if the HOA closes the pool at 10 p.m., but it is accessible technically 24/7 via locked gate. So I would imagine probably just the liability portion on that.
What was the question though? So if it's a locked,
it just asked in a comment, if we close the pool at 10, but there's 24/7.
Well, yeah, and remember though that when it comes to being a board member in an association, the liability is whether your action was reasonable. So nobody's expecting you to stand out there on guard, at 10:01 p.m. You've done the pool hours are X. If somebody does violate it, you can certainly ask homeowners to let you know. And that way, if you know that it does happen, then your reasonable action is to enforce against that particular person. But I don't think it's reasonable to have to post somebody out there 24 hours just to make sure that nobody gets in. Think about it the same way as, it's different, but it's the same as a different kind of rule. So if you have a rule at the pool that says no running around the swimming pool, you're not going to post somebody there 24 hours to see if anybody's running around the swimming pool. But the consequences of somebody running around the swimming pool during the day, the consequences are so minimal, and the risk of any kind of liability is so minimal, the association, then it doesn't have the same impact as the COVID situation, where you have a rule that says no more than everybody has to be 6 feet apart and no more than X number of people. If that is violated during the day, during pool hours, then liability is different than somebody running around the pool. So you treat it differently, but it still doesn't mean that you have to have somebody there 24/7. It's kind of what makes sense for your community, depending on the type of community you have, how big it is. Somebody had mentioned, how the size of the pool. Maybe it's tiny, maybe it's big. Maybe there's a lot of room to go around. Maybe nobody shows up, and it's not a lot of traffic. So all of these circumstances should be taken into consideration when you're putting together your plan of what to do when you reopen.
Yeah, and I think that goes back, same thing from an insurance perspective around liability. The liability claims, where they get expensive is when we were egregious, we were grossly negligent, right? We knew we were doing something wrong and we made that choice anyway. Like we knew there was the edge of the pool was coming up and people were tripping, right? Now someone trips and gets seriously injured. That's when we have liability. So if we take reasonable steps with a reasonable person would do, if we keep the social distancing, right, we're going to reduce our exposure. If we reduce how many people are there, like if we do those things, we've now reduced our potential exposure for being negligent, which is a trigger and a requirement for someone to be legally liable. So.
Yeah, I mean, courts do not want to hold directors liable just because they want to defer to your decisions. They realize that you're not getting paid for these decisions. And they also realize that if they did hold you liable for something that you certainly took the standard of care and tried to make an informed decision, nobody's going to serve on the board. So when it comes down to the bottom line is taking everything that we said today, if you still decide to open the pool, but you've done all the other things that we talked about and we minimize that exposure, I'd be very surprised if a board was held liable after making such an attempt to try to comply and to try to do things right under the circumstances of that association.
Yeah, but I had one other question that came in about liability, attractive nuisance, allowing pools and hot tubs in people's backyards and their fence being small, the association's fence, that if people actually went and got injured. From an insurance perspective, you would have coverage. The likelihood that the association has liability in those situations, in my mind, is probably less likely, but I don't know of a general liability policy that wouldn't at least protect the association in that case. And then I think there was one question. Lifeguards, did we talk about the lifeguards? I think someone had a question on if they should or shouldn't, or if they don't.
And I know, if the lifeguards, they have their own obligations and duties, and they're supposed to be adhering to those duties. And I don't know. I would talk to your pool vendors whether it's appropriate to say, okay, well, let's modify the contract, and now the lifeguard's additional duty will be X. And if that's appropriate, maybe it's appropriate. I don't know if that takes away from their own, if it takes away from their own obligations that they're already supposed to be doing at the pool, watching for certain things to happen. Does this double the duty by making them also watch for and make sure that social distancing is going to be complied with? I don't know. It doesn't, I don't know the answer to that. I would talk to probably the pools and the lifeguards and see what they're saying and whether they're willing to. I think they are. I think a lot of lifeguards are saying, vendors are saying that it's okay for them to assume those additional duties, but I would have that discussion with them. Know what your expectation, what the expectations are of them and of you, because they might not know that you're expecting them to also monitor for this.
Yeah, some people are ask about the recording. You can either, if you want to, either post your email or shoot me an email. I posted my email. I'm also going to put it on the Schad Agency YouTube page, so you can search for that there, and that should be on later today, as well as our Facebook page. So those would be ways to get it afterward. I did see a couple people join late about a question about the bathroom, which we kind of went over. I don't know if you want to summarize that real quickly, Melissa.
So the bathrooms, yeah. There's nothing at this point that I have found that says you can't close the bathrooms, if that's what the question is. I do see that for public pools and semi-public pools, you do have to have the bathrooms available. But for private pools, I haven't found anything. Maybe there's look at your local ordinances as well, because I'm just looking at this at a state level. But the problems might be, what if somebody has a disability and they need to use the bathroom and there's no easy access to it now that you've closed it and they have to go home, and maybe it takes a while for them to go home. Maybe kids are going to start peeing in the pool, I don't know why I always just say kids. Maybe anybody could start peeing in the pool. And I had read something that, again, this is not a legal opinion, but this is what I thought I read, which is peeing in the pool then affects the effectiveness of whatever chemicals would stop the virus from occurring in the water itself. And that's something that I read, so it's not a legal issue, but I'd probably recommend against closing the pool and instead increasing your cleaning protocols, making sure that they're wiped down and sanitized on a regular basis. And if you do close them, just realize those are the other issues that could occur.
Again, on lifeguards, if they don't have lifeguards, from the safety exposure, from an insurance perspective, obviously you want to talk to your agent, but it's generally not a requirement in most insurance policies to have a lifeguard. Obviously, it provides and reduces the risk and exposure, and for some people, and then if you've got slides and so forth, and at some point you're using them, maybe you want lifeguards. For a lot of pools, it's probably not necessary, so that's something you'd want to discuss with your insurance. Melissa, do you have anything on that from a legal standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's not required to, an association isn't required to have a lifeguard if it has a pool. So certainly lifeguards or pool monitors, if you were wanting to adhere to, make sure you're monitoring and enforcing the safer at home order or whatever the new order is going to be, then certainly having a pool monitor or having a lifeguard and ensuring that their duty includes these monitoring duties as well for the safer at home order. That would help you, again, make sure that you as an association are complying with the order. But there's nothing that requires you to have a lifeguard per state law. And I don't know necessarily what the percentages of associations that do have lifeguards. Obviously, if you have a big pool with a lot of people, it's better than and more recommended than if you have a small pool and very little traffic. So it's probably not as necessary in those ones.
Any guidance on language for waivers? Is it best they just contact their attorney, or what's your?
It's best that you contact me, not your attorney. No, yeah, the waivers. Yeah, there's a sample waiver. It's not a sample pool waiver, but we have a sample on our website. We are drafting them for our clients. So yes, talk to your attorney, and your attorney could tailor it to your situation, and the waiver could be used for the pool, the rec facilities, other facilities. But if you want to see the kind of language that we sometimes put in it that's not as specific for this and not as detailed, we have something on our website. Our website is www.altitude.law. And it has something called sample waiver or release, which is it's something like that, sample waiver and release, which is a form that's like the basic form of waiving liability. What it's usually used is if you have like a committee that's going to be part of some beautification project for the association, and they want to be part of it, but you don't want them suing you if they get hurt doing this project. So that's what you would typically use. That would be the start of it. It wouldn't be appropriate to take that one and say, okay, this is what we're going to use, because it doesn't have the language that is tailored to COVID. So, but you can see some of the typical language that would be on there.
Yeah, and speaking of which, if you do have volunteers, you can, from associations, if you don't have employees, you can buy a ghost work comp policy, meaning it's ghost because there's nobody, there's actually not employees that could cover volunteers, official volunteers in their capacity. And so if they did get injured, from a work comp standpoint, I have not seen where work comp would not be able to pay out if somebody considered they got sick at the job. Potentially, I think it's most likely that work comp will have to pay. We'll see as that kind of moves forward, but there is an ability for associations to purchase a ghost work comp policy as well to potentially help if they've got volunteers doing work. Tylene actually brought up something from the CDC that lifeguards should not enforce social distancing. I think I did read specifically it's hard for a lifeguard to be able to do both, and if they're trying to, they're looking away from the pool and they should be looking at the pool. So
exactly. Yeah.
All right, I think that was a lot. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Sorry we went a lot over. Obviously, a ton of questions and so pressing.
I like to talk.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Any other questions before we leave? Perfect.
I have a rhyme that you should remember that we put. I think I told you this, Devon. So I was giving a webinar a couple months about this, and we came up with a rhyme of, if you don't have the ability, then don't open the facility, which means if you don't have the mechanisms in place, sort of an OJS kind of thing. But remember that if you don't have the ability, don't open the facility.
Perfect.
Yay.
All right, great. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Bye, guys.